In my last video, I was adding integers or numbers using a rule of sign, which states that anytime you are adding two numbers with the same sign, you add them both and keep the same sign. However, you cannot use that rule to solve this problem because both numbers have opposite signs. So negative 20 plus 15, the 20 is negative and the 15 is positive. So how can we solve this with a rule? Well, the rule is when you have two different signs, or if you are adding two numbers and they both have opposite signs, you subtract the smaller absolute value from the larger absolute value and then keep the sign of the larger absolute value for your answer. So let's talk about absolute value first before we start solving negative 20 plus 15. So absolute value. So what is absolute value? The best way to put a, a good definition for absolute value is, let's start with a number. Let's say negative 4, which is an integer. And if you see these two vertical lines, these two vertical lines, and you have a number inside these two vertical lines, what that is telling you is these vertical lines is that it represent the operation of finding the absolute value of negative 4. So negative 4 is not the absolute value. That is just a number. The absolute value is going to be 4. And the reason why it's 4 is because the absolute value refers to the distance from 0 on the number line. And it doesn't matter if the number inside these two lines is a negative or positive, it's going to be positive as your absolute value, because we only look at the distance or the units away from 0. So you're 4 units away from 0. Now, let's go back to the problem. Negative 20 plus 15. And we need to look for the absolute value of negative 20 and 15. So negative 20, and we need to find the absolute value of this number, negative 20, which is 20. So you're 20 spaces or 20 units away from 0. And then 15, it's a positive 15, which is the absolute value is 15. So we found our two absolute value, which is 20 and 15. And we know that 20, or the absolute of 20, is bigger than 15, right? Now, the next step is to subtract the smaller absolute value from the larger absolute value. So 20 minus 15 equals, so 20 take away 15, that's 5. Then the answer will take, which is the 5, the answer is the 5. The answer will take the sign from the original number that had the larger absolute value. So the 20 is the largest, it's larger than 15. So that is your larger absolute value. And we're going to take that negative from the original number here that gave us the absolute value of 20 and give that to the 5. So your answer is negative 5. That is your answer. And that is how you solve these types these type of problems. So there you go. Now let's practice. Let's say we have -5 plus 15. That equals. So pause the video, try to solve it yourself, and then press play to check your answer. Okay, now we need to find the absolute value of these two numbers, -5 and +15, because they are different. We're adding two numbers with opposite signs, and the rule states that anytime you are adding two numbers that have opposite signs, you subtract the smaller absolute value from the larger absolute value, and then keep the sign of the larger absolute value for your answer. So let's go ahead and find the absolute value of 5. So 5, -5, that gives us 5. So 5 is the absolute value, and then 15, the absolute value of 15, the number 15 is 15. So you're 15 units away from 0, and then you're 5 units away from 0. So which absolute value is bigger? 15 is bigger than 5. So our answer will be a positive because we're going to take the sign from the original number that gave us the biggest or the larger absolute value, which is 15. So we need to subtract 15 minus 5. That gives us, so 15 take away 5 is 10. And then we're going to take the positive from the original 15 and give it to the 10. So the answer is positive 10 or just 10. That is your answer. There you go. Now, there is a trick that we can use. That way we are not writing all this information down. The trick is 1, identify the absolute value. I'm going to write abs for short, absolute value. Actually, I'm going to write the whole thing. And I'm going to make this a little bit better. Write this a little bit better. So, identify the absolute value that is the first thing you do. 2, you will subtract the large. Now I'll go ahead and say abs, and I'll just say abs v there. Subtract the large absolute value minus small absolute value. And then 3, your answer will take the sign of the original number that had the larger absolute value. So let me go ahead and write all that. The answer will take the sign of the original number that had the larger absolute value. So let me go ahead and write a problem here. Let's say negative 20 plus positive 15 equals. So the first thing you do is identify the absolute value. You should know that negative 20 is the number. And then mentally just think, okay, negative 20, the absolute value of negative 20 is 20. And then the absolute value of this number 15 is 15. So you subtract 20 minus 15. That's the second step. Subtract large absolute value minus small absolute value. So 20 minus 15. 20 is bigger than 15. That gives you 5. And then the last one is the answer will take the sign of the original number that had the larger absolute value. So the 20 is the larger absolute value, and the original number is negative 20. So you take that negative sign from the negative 20 or the 20 and give it to the 5. So the answer is negative 5. Easy. And there you go.